Wow, this week escalated quickly. We've got Starship Flight 13 inching closer with more testing completed, SpaceX unveiling eye-watering plans for colossal constellations along with the gigantic new production facilities. I'm sure you've noticed the constant stream of media attention about the initial public offering taking SpaceX partially public, and NASA dropped a stack of fresh Artemis III details that raise almost as many questions about SpaceX and Blue Origin's human landing system test setup as they answer. It's only once in a blue moon we get this many updates in a week, so strap in tight.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Hey, Margot's House with you here, and boy has it been a week flooded with information on some grand plan thinking for SpaceX and the Starship program. First, let's just catch up on where we are at for the upcoming Starship Flight 13 though. The Super Heavy for this flight, Booster 20, was sitting at the Massey's cryo station where we left you last week. They kicked right into gear just hours after that video went live, and they were filling both tanks to the brim with cryogenic liquid. Testing took place over an approximate 8-hour period from when the first frost appeared to when it had all fully melted away. All of that looked successful from a distance, and then SpaceX did another test here the next day, which had us witnessing plenty of venting and frost on the tanks, but this time it certainly wasn't filled like the first test. That was it seemed, and it was already rolling back to the production site. Sean was out there watching it roll by and off into Mega Bay 1 on Tuesday night. There, of course, it remains, presumably now getting its 33 Raptor 3 engines. Its partner ship 40 is still sitting on the back left stand of Mega Bay 2, but it should now have all 6 of its Raptor 3 engines installed, given that we saw those roll out last week. At the Massey's test site, where this will soon be rolling, the ship cryo stand that was hogging the flame trench had been moved out of the way. Along with that, all of the scaffolding that was previously lining the edge of the trench here has been removed between the last flight, thanks to RGV aerial photography. It looks like they may have been doing some maintenance work on the lip of the trench wall, which seems to have been completed now, so we should have Ship 40 here kicking off that static fire campaign soon. In an interview dropped by CNBC late this week, Gwynne Shotwell did hint that Flight 13 may only be about a month away, so we should see some big movements over the next week or two. The production of other future Starship and Super Heavy vehicles is still ongoing, of course, but they have a lot of varying production rates. Once this monstrous gigabay in front is finished, they will have 24 workstations for vehicle construction, so everything is going to start moving at a completely different level. Not just for creating new vehicles, but also scanning and repairing or upgrading any previously flown vehicles. Interestingly, Mauricio was able to shoot this great perspective shot through the door of Mega Bay 1 from above here before Booster 20 had rolled back. This is Booster 21, presumably for Flight 14, sitting on the liquid oxygen side tank installation stand. The aft engine section then rolled into the bay to complete the entire main liquid oxygen tank section of the vehicle. From this perspective in Mega Bay 2, you can also see Ship 41, which again is presumably for Flight 14, sitting on the middle stand, having the remaining pieces of its heat shield installed. Once that is ready to go, that can head to Massey's for the initial cryogenic proof testing. Gwynne also mentioned that SpaceX is hoping to be able to finally go orbital with this mission, but that will depend on the outcome of Flight 13. Now, we have got some pretty neat updates this week from this presentation by Dan Hewitt, SpaceX's communications manager, Ian Dahl, a satellite engineer, and of course Elon, all sharing some of the future growth areas for SpaceX. Included were a series of great graphics showcasing some of their production sites and their expected growth, and wow, is the scale of this plan just beyond crazy. Let's start with their Gigasat facility in Bastrop, Texas, where they currently produce their Starlink user terminals. They are hoping to go from an existing 1 million square foot workspace and multiplying that by 11. Indeed, a staggering 11 million square feet of workspace will be the future here, which will be used to design and develop their future space-based data centers, but also the much larger satellite production facility here. Alongside, we have the production lines for the solar ingots, wafers, and cells needed to power all these satellites. That is just the start though, because then you've got their plans for their Terrafab facility in Grimes County, Texas. This aims to absolutely dwarf the Tesla Gigafactory workspace by roughly 10 times, all aiming to create the largest production line in history for chip fabrication. Indeed, if you love it, hate it, or are just utterly indifferent about AI tech, these chips will get crammed into the satellites and other technology to produce ridiculous compute power, which SpaceX AI can rent to anyone requiring that compute power. This seems to be a very reliable way to currently make money because the largest companies in the world can't seem to get enough of it, and the supply of chips has even driven up the cost of all of our computer hardware, including those needed just to do a little video editing or play a few games. Needless to say, it seems like SpaceX aren't going to be needing to steal underpants at all to fund Starship development and exploration, as was joked about way back here in 2016. They are instead putting themselves in a great position to lead the race, provided that they meet their goals and get starships launching daily. So that is always the crazy and amazing spectacle that we get so fired up about. As with many of SpaceX's overly optimistic targets, we got this slide here, which is meant to give us an idea of SpaceX's mass to orbit goals with Starship. The scale there on the left is astronomical, by the way, so much so that the payload planned to get to orbit through to 2027 wouldn't even be a single pixel in height at this scale. The rather, let's say, staggering increase in 2028, though, sits at around 200,000 tons to orbit. Yeah, almost comically aspirational maybe, and if you assumed that these were Starship version 4s with a payload capability of their stated 200 tons per launch, that would be 1,000 launches in 2028, or almost 3 per day. Indeed, there is a lot that SpaceX would need to prove if they really want to see that future so fast, and here of course you've got the insane creases in the years that follow. But look, don't shoot the messenger. SpaceX will work fast, but I'll believe this one when I see it. Anyway, going back to the data centers, they've announced here their brand new first generation AI satellite, which will use the same PES deployment mechanisms as the Starlink satellites do for Starship. These are expected to be launching by the end of 2027. The first generation satellite design will launch with NVIDIA chips, but that design will support the other chip providers in the future, obviously including SpaceX AI's own manufactured chips once they are operational. The satellites themselves will span 20 metres with the radiators deployed in this direction, that's this part here, and then there is this huge wingspan of 70 metres when the solar panels are extended. This is pretty crazy because it's roughly the same length as a fully stacked Falcon 9, or just a little shorter than the Super Heavy booster. That's crazy, right? And both solar arrays combined will produce 150 kilowatts of peak power. They also dropped a rather interesting number here too, 70 kilowatts per tonne, which should mean that each satellite is around 2.14 tonnes. Based on that, if you crammed 60 of those in the current version 3 Starship payload bay, that would weigh in at around 128 tonnes. Now, these data center satellites will be made up quite differently to, say, Starlink, which is obviously built for communications. Instead, though, these don't need anywhere near the battery capacity. Where Starlink satellites spend a lot of their time in darkness, these instead will be placed into higher orbits that are permanently lit by the sun. They also don't need a lot of the communications hardware from the underside of the satellites like Starlink satellites. Instead, the data center satellites can just use a few of their state-of-the-art laser-based communication systems to interlink through the many thousands of Starlink satellites in the constellation below. All of this future technology just seems like science fiction, doesn't it? But I remember thinking exactly the same thing about Starlink. Now look where we are. Thanks to your support, we'll be right here covering it all. And of course, thanks a bunch for being subscribed here and watching along through this incredible story, and indeed, all space news that pops up every week. Just yesterday on Friday, of course, gathering monstrous media attention over the past weeks, SpaceX has officially become a partly publicly traded company. In fact, it's the biggest initial public offering in history, which places SpaceX in the top 10 of Wall Street's biggest companies, with a valuation close to $1.8 trillion. Wow. To meet that valuation expectation, though, all those Starship dreams need to come true fast. So where are we at with the next steps to come? Well, at the Flight Active Pad 2, the tower arms are still receiving lots of attention. Both of the catch rails have been fully reinstalled after being modified to a lighter weight design. These old ones we could still see laying on the ground. Their dampers that were also removed were seen returning on the back of a truck bed too, so these should be reinstalled soon, if not by the time this video is live. Another interesting point this week was watching SpaceX remove over half of the 12 skates which allow the carriage to ride up and down the tower. Before jumping into that though, another big thank you to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. I'm obviously in favour of the internet being an open and accessible experience, as I'm sure you are, but as time goes by there are more restrictions popping up which makes it feel like a weird maze where your passage is virtually blocked by walls. Well, that is where Surfshark VPN steps in to instantly solve these problems. Once you install it, you just choose the country you want to be browsing from like this and connect to that, and as far as the service that you are trying to connect to is concerned, you are right within that country of origin. Simply hit refresh and that's it, you're in. It's especially useful for me when a YouTube video is blocked within a various country, but often we'll have things blocked here simply due to compliance concerns. Another great thing to use it for is price checking if you're planning on travelling. What we see these days is companies using pricing tricks to get the maximum value possible around the world by changing the values depending on where you're from. With Surfshark though, you can just hop through the countries and refresh to see if you're getting a reasonable price. Just the one subscription covers all your devices, by the way, so you can have it here on your phone like I have, or you can have it on your tablet, PC and any other supported device. If you are still hesitant and just want to give it a try, they give you a 30-day money-back guarantee, so check it out. Go to surfshark.com/Marcus or use the code Marcus at checkout to get 4 extra months. You can also scan that QR code right there on screen. Thank you, Surfshark. Okay, so back to the Pad 2 tower, which is of course needed to launch the next Starship mission. Removing those skates seemed a little strange to some after just the one Starship flight so far. Well, don't panic because these were all reinstalled into their original locations after some hours of inspections or some kind of maintenance, we assume. If you then look over at the arms themselves, you'll notice these bright looking areas where the paint has been removed. These are for welding even more reinforcements to those steel tubes that make up the arms. Over at Pad 1 being rapidly upgraded, I'm very happy to see that the first pieces of the foundation have been poured. There's hundreds of trucks of concrete left to go, of course, but the bottom of the pipe trench, which will transport commodities into the bunker, has been tied in with rebar and poured here. An additional layer just above that for the foundation of the commodities bunker itself, we can already see being laid with rebar. There's plenty of steel to come too, with all of this piling up with trench segments arriving recently. We have the centre filler pieces in this spot and then some of the angled pieces over here. Now, you may recall last week I pointed out the new foundations for the methane generation and liquid natural gas liquefaction plant was underway. Well, finally, after all this time, we know where the source of this natural gas is going to come from. SpaceX has begun the process of requesting a brand new 16-inch diameter natural gas pipeline running all the way from the port of Brownsville. This will presumably tap into the same system that feeds the gargantuan Texas liquid natural gas plant here. If we check out the Starbase launch site plans released last year, it shows 2 liquid natural gas liquefaction plants positioned by either pad, which will obviously first liquefy the natural gas coming in from this new pipeline, and then it will all move through the methane generation plant. Here it will strip out those small quantities of ethane, propane, butane and anything they can, leaving only the purified liquid methane which will be stored in their tank farms for launch. So there has also been plenty of neat stuff happening this week from Florida. The drone ship You'll Thank Me Later we saw last week heading back to Florida from Texas with some transport stands on board. Well, it had arrived on Monday where it was then backed up to the ramp. First out was this Starship stand, then the booster stand followed by the other Starship stand. They left the basin together and thanks to Max with NSF, here they were in front of the vehicle assembly building. It almost feels bizarre to see Starship hardware rolling in, but we'll be seeing a lot more arrivals soon. Another point Gwynne Shotwell dropped in the CNBC interview was the hope that Starship Flight 15 could be the first to fly from the new pad at Launch Complex 39A. A lot would need to go perfectly for Flight 13 and 14 for that to happen, I'm sure, but that just goes to show how close the full build is here at the site. While in the area though, check this out. Julia caught the very first Starship Tower module being stacked onto the base at Pad 37A. Yes, you heard that right, and as confirmed by SpaceX's VP of Launch, they seem to be keeping the old A and B naming scheme that United Launch Alliance also used instead of Pad 1 and 2. Now there is loads more about Starship and the Artemis III mission yet to talk about, thanks to NASA dropping a whole bunch of new information this week, but I'll come back to all that. A few quick mentions worth ripping through first though. We had SpaceX breaking another record this week with Falcon 9. The first Starlink Group 1743 launched from Vandenberg Space Force Base on Saturday evening, and interestingly, this one had 2 Starshield satellites on board. SpaceX actually shared this shot, showing the 2 Starshields in the top of the stack there. Moments later, booster 1097 touched down on the drone ship Of Course I Still Love You for its 10th landing. The next was the record breaker though. On Monday, Starlink 1035 took off from Space Launch Complex 40 right before sunrise. Although this may look like a routine mission, the booster flying was numbered 1067, flying here for an insane 35 times. It almost feels like a casual flex these days, sending boosters like this to keep pushing that record even higher. After successfully separating away to let the second stage deliver the 29 satellites to orbit, the booster made its way back to Earth to touch down on the drone ship A Shortfall of Gravitas, completing that record, 35 landings. A little over 5 years ago, this booster made its debut flight with CRS-22, carrying a cargo Dragon mission to the International Space Station. It is still kicking after this ridiculous set of missions. How awesome is that? Group 1744 was then away on Thursday morning back at Vandenberg, and booster 1071 was on flight 34. Yes, this is the closest runner-up to that record holder. They've really pushed the oldest in the fleet here this week. The drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, had done the full round trip since its Saturday mission and was already back for this catch. That just left Group 1054 on Friday morning back in Florida. Another pretty ancient booster, number 1080 for this one too, with flight number 27, and A Shortfall of Gravitas was also doing that rapid turnaround to be back out here again for the 4th Falcon catch of the week. They sure aren't messing around. A few more neat updates from Stoke Space's test site. After working day in and out on their first stage and hot-firing the Zenith engine multiple times every day, this has officially concluded the rigorous proto-qualification testing campaign. That's great news because it means that this first stage structure is going to make its way to the next stage, which is a major step towards flight for Stoke Space, so I can't wait to see what comes next. JAXA also launched their H3 rocket, but this time a brand new H330 configuration. This followed the H3-8 anomaly last December, causing damage with the second stage during stage separation, but no problem this time. The payload on board was just a mass simulator and a few small satellites, given that this was the first flight of this configuration, but man, it looks weird, doesn't it? This configuration just has the 3 LE9 engines. The core stage of H3 can be flown with 2 or 3 in fact, and with this mission successful, JAXA will be able to meet a broader launch market. Okay, so back to NASA's big Artemis III announcement event on Tuesday, where they announced the names of the 4 crew members to fly on this mission. It wasn't just that though, because crammed right before it were some huge surprises. NASA revealed a number of new modifications to the Artemis architecture, along with a few glimpses into how Starship and Blue Origin landers are going to fit into all of this. For Artemis III, Blue Origin plans to launch what they named their Blue Moon Mark II Earth Orbit Rendezvous demonstrator, and this will launch first with New Glenn. As you can see, this is quite different and cut back from the full future Blue Moon Mark II. This demonstrator is a bit of an odd sort of hybrid looking vehicle between the Blue Moon Mark I and II, as we can see thanks to the always sweet work by infographic Tony. It does have the same lunar crew module as Mark II and will be the first production article, so they're going to have the same environmental control, life support systems and flight software. So to test test everything will be a key objective, which is exciting. Of course, the primary differences between the full Mark II and this spacecraft is that the final lander will have the BE-7 engines. This means that instead of having cryogenic propellant, they are just sending this to orbit with propellants needed for the reaction control system. That makes sense because they don't need the huge thrust needed for a lunar burn or even landing on the moon. This demonstrator vehicle is designed to remain in orbit for up to 90 days, giving mission planners a large operational window. Orion will then launch with the Artemis III crew on the Space Launch System and rendezvous with Blue Origin's demonstrator in low Earth orbit. It will then dock with the vehicle and the astronauts will begin kicking off all of the extensive testing with Blue Origin's life support systems. They will spend about 2 days attached conducting tests and technology demonstrations, which will include doing plenty of tasks inside Blue Origin's spacecraft. NASA stated that they will perform integrated stack control, operate the lander vehicle itself, and do critical testing of the life support systems. In the meantime, SpaceX will launch their demonstration Starship vehicle. After completing the operations with Blue Origin, Orion will detach and wait for Starship to rendezvous with it. Now this, sadly, will not be anything like the human landing system design, but it'll just be a standard Starship version 3 or something pretty close to it. All we really know is that this will have a docking adapter attached to test with the Orion crew module, but where that docking adapter will be located is another story. From what we know from the HLS design, this docks from the nose, but the standard Starship has header tanks up there. This has raised a lot of questions. Will it be mounted to the payload area just for this mission? Perhaps they'll just make a one-off Starship, strip the header tanks out and shove a docking port in the nose anyway. Well, we just don't know, and again, sadly, it'll not really contain anything for the crew such as a pressurized cabin inside or anything like that, so no one will be venturing inside. I'm personally really disappointed by this because my hope was that we would see crew inside Starship and testing equipment just as they will be with Blue Origin's demonstrator. I mean, think about this. The Artemis IV mission that follows is supposed to take NASA's astronauts to the lunar surface. If it is indeed Starship doing this and there is no other crew mission in between, that means that astronauts will not have any chance to do testing in microgravity until they are on that moon landing mission. Now we're wondering if SpaceX could end up doing some of their own crew test missions in between, perhaps just using Dragon instead. Well, we don't know, and I would love to know what you think about this because, to me, this is all very confusing. I think we just wanted to see so much more from the HLS Starship because the landing engines we've seen for years in renders up here near the payload area we know nothing about even still, and on top of that, my own personal gripe, when are we going to see some landing legs appear for the first time in testing? Anyway, Orion and Starship will dock and be connected together for about a day before Orion is undocked and the crew prepares to return home. In total, the full mission is expected to last around 2 weeks. Now, the Artemis III crew lineup was presented too, of course, which was very exciting. First, serving as the solo backup crew member is Robert Hines. We have Italian astronaut Luca Parmitano from the European Space Agency introduced as the pilot, and then we have 3 NASA astronauts. Randy Bresnik will be commanding the mission, and the 2 mission specialists for Artemis III will be Andre Douglas and Frank Rubio. That is a talented lineup there with loads of spaceflight experience overall, but for Andre, this will be his first trip to space. So yeah, big congrats there to the crew. It is a big deal every time we see these mission plans announced. Now, alongside all of that, it was also mentioned that SpaceX's Starship propellant transfer demonstration is planned and still on track for later this year. Interestingly, we also had a more official word saying that in Artemis IV, Starship is expected to dock with the Orion crew module in low Earth orbit and perform its translunar injection burn with Orion still attached. This way, Orion is sent all the way to the moon before using any propellant at all, which results in a more useful lunar orbit. That, if it all turns out to be true, is a big deal, and we didn't expect that as soon as Artemis IV. I think the question is, though, what is really to become of SLS? It seems pretty crazy to use a rocket with that expense just to put Orion and the rest of the vehicle into Earth orbit. I would love to know what you think of that too. Now, although Blue Origin's Artemis III plan may be the more exciting half of the mission, do they have any chance of getting there by mid next year? Yes, you heard that right. NASA is still targeting no earlier than mid-2027 for this mission. Well, we've got more positive news from Blue Origin after their destructive event a few weeks ago. They've begun moving hardware out of the horizontal integration facility right next to the pad there. The handful of New Glenn Stage 2s and the first stage booster, Never Tell Me the Odds, was taken back to Rocket Park as cleanup and recovery efforts continue at Launch Complex 36A. There's no visible damage here of any sort, which is nice to see, and work is blasting away 24/7 already as they attempt to push towards launch again this year. It is quite the deadline, but they have huge support rolling in to get this done, so it'll be interesting to see how fast they can get back into action. So I hope you enjoyed this video, my friends. If you did, don't forget to hit subscribe so we get to keep making them. Thanks again to Surfshark VPN for helping us put in all the work that we can into these videos. If you want to continue with more space awesomeness, you may have missed this video, so check it out. Thanks as always for watching all this way through. Seriously, it helps more than you can imagine. I'll catch you next weekend.